Fact number 76. The ichthys symbol. In the 2nd century, Christians did not wear the cross. Instead, they used the symbol of a fish, ichthys, to identify each other. If two strangers met, one would draw an arc on the ground. If the other person completed it to form a fish, they knew both were Christians. It was a secret code. Fact number 77. Chera dynasty and South India. The Chera kings of South India had such deep ties with Rome that they built a temple for the Roman Emperor Augustus in Muziris. Imagine, 2,000 years ago in Kerala, India, there was a Roman temple where Roman soldiers offered prayers. This is one of the oldest examples of globalization. Fact number 78. Closing Alexander's tomb. At the end of the 2nd century, Emperor Septimius Severus sealed the tomb of Alexander the Great. Before that, many emperors visited to touch Alexander's mummy. One even accidentally broke his nose. After Severus closed it, the tomb vanished so completely that it hasn't been found to this day. The location of Alexander's mummy remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Fact number 79. Victory amidst a pandemic. Marcus Aurelius's war. When the Antonine plague weakened the Roman army, Germanic tribes attacked. Despite a sick and depleted force, Marcus Aurelius fought the Marcomannic Wars. To fill the shortage of soldiers, he took the desperate step of recruiting slaves and gladiators into the army. It was a risky move, but he saved Rome. Fact number 80. Rise of Chow Chow. At the end of the 2nd century, 196 AD, a warlord took control of the Han Emperor in China. His name was Chow Chow. He was a great poet, general, and politician. While history often portrays him as a villain, he famously said, "I would rather betray the world than let the world betray me." He was the greatest mind master of the Three Kingdoms era. Fact number 81. Writing of Kama Sutra. In the 2nd century or early 3rd, Maharishi Vatsyana composed the Kama Sutra in India. Many people think it is just a book about intercourse, but it is actually a treatise on the art of living. Only about 20% of the book is about sexual relations. The remaining 80% focuses on how to be a good citizen, how to decorate a home, how to maintain friendships, and how to choose a life partner. Fact number 82. Strangled by a wrestler. The erratic Emperor Commodus was poisoned, but he didn't die. He vomited it out. His enemies then sent his personal trainer, a wrestler named Narcissus, to kill him. On December 31st, 1992 AD, Narcissus strangled Commodus in his bathtub. The emperor, who saw himself as Hercules, was killed by an unarmed wrestler. Fact number 84. Hatred for blue. Romans considered the color blue to be unlucky and barbarian. To them, having blue eyes or wearing blue clothes was disgraceful because their enemies, the Germans and Celts, painted their bodies blue. If a Roman had blue eyes, people mocked it as a physical defect. Blue clothing was only worn for mourning or dirty labor. Fact number 85. Ancient doggy bag. At Roman banquets, guests would bring their own napkin, called a mappa. However, it wasn't just for wiping their mouths. After the feast, it was completely acceptable for guests to wrap up leftover delicious food in that napkin to take home. This was the ancient version of today's takeaway or doggy bag. Fact number 86. Ancient climate change. By the end of the 2nd century, the Roman warm period began to end and the weather turned colder. This can be seen as the beginning of the late antique Little Ice Age. Changing weather led to crop failures. With a plague on one side and famine on the other, many scientists believe the true cause of Rome's fall wasn't an enemy, but climate change. Mystery number 86. South-pointing chariot. Mechanical engineers in China, later improved by Ma Jun, built a chariot with a statue mounted on top.
No matter which direction you turned the chariot, the statue's finger always pointed south. This did not work with a magnet, but through differential gears. It was such a complex technology that it was only rediscovered in Europe 1,000 years later. Mystery number 87. Christians were atheists. It sounds strange, but in the 2nd century, Romans used to call Christians atheists and persecuted them. For Romans, a theist was someone who believed in Roman gods, Jupiter, Mars. Since Christians did not believe in those idols, Romans thought these people were enemies of the gods and a threat to society. Mystery number 88. Cremation to burial. For centuries, Romans used to burn their dead, cremation. But in the 2nd century, the fashion suddenly changed and they started burying them, inhumation. Wealthy people began commissioning marble coffins, sarcophagi, instead of urns for ashes. This happened perhaps due to the growing influence of Christianity or Eastern fashions. Mystery number 89. Severus's final advice: pay the soldiers. Emperor Septimius Severus, 193 to 211 AD, gave his sons one piece of advice on his deathbed, which became the mantra for the next 100 years. Be harmonious, enrich the soldiers, and scorn all others. He turned Rome into a military dictatorship. Now, the ruler wasn't the one who was most capable, but the one who had the most swords. Mystery number 90. Gladiator referees. Movies show gladiator matches as mere slaughter, but in reality, there were referees, summa rudis, who wore white clothes and carried a stick. They could stop the match if someone's armor broke or if someone broke the rules. Gladiator fights were a proper sport, not a massacre. Many matches ended without anyone dying, a draw. Mystery number 91. German hair trend, bleaching. As Romans enslaved Germanic tribes, Roman women began to admire their blonde hair. Dark-haired Roman women used pigeon droppings and vinegar to bleach their hair. Sometimes this bleach was so strong that all their hair fell out and they had to wear wigs. Mystery number 92. The plague didn't spare China. Han plague. At the same time the Antonine plague spread in Rome, a pandemic also hit China, 151 to 185 AD. Some scholars believe the virus traveled across the world via the Silk Road. China's population dropped from 50 million to 15 million in just a few decades, according to census data, though this also included displacement due to war. Mystery number 93. Coin of Noah's Ark. At the end of the 2nd century, a city in Turkey, Apamea, issued coins featuring the biblical Noah and his ark. This shows how Jewish and Christian stories had reached Roman imperial coinage, even though the religion was not fully accepted. Mystery number 94. Origins of the handshake. Although shaking hands might be very old, in Roman times, grasping the forearm, arm grasp, was more common. This wasn't to show love. It was to check if the person was hiding a dagger in their sleeve. The handshake was actually a security check. Mystery number 95. Galen's magical cure, theriac. The most expensive and famous medicine of the 2nd century was theriac. It contained 64 ingredients, including opium and snake flesh. Emperor Marcus Aurelius ate a little bit of it every day, so that if someone poisoned him, it wouldn't have an effect. It was considered the world's first universal antidote, And because of the opium, it made the user feel very good. Mystery number 96, Rise of Lawyers. By the 2nd century, Roman law had become so complex that an ordinary man could not fight his own case. This led to the rise of professional lawyers, jurists. The laws written by the lawyers of that time, like Ulpian and Papinian, are still the basis of European law today, civil law. Mystery number 97, Toilets of Pergamon. In the 2nd century, the world's most magnificent public toilets were built in Pergamon, Turkey. There were marble seats and a running water system. In the winter, the seats were warmed by slaves. It was one of the most luxury toilets in the world. Mystery number 98, Eclipse of Science. After Ptolemy and Galen, scientific discoveries came to a halt. People stopped experimenting and began to accept old books as the absolute truth. This can be called the dawn of the scientific Dark Ages. After the end of the 2nd century, it took humanity another 1,000 years to make the next big leap. Mystery number 99, End of Pax Romana. With the death of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, 180 AD, the 200-year-old golden era of Roman peace, Pax Romana, came to an end. What followed is what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century, where Rome almost collapsed. Peace was replaced by civil war. Mystery number 100, Conclusion of the century. By 200 AD, the world had changed. Rome was sick and weak. China was divided into 3 parts, the 3 kingdoms, and trade in India was declining from its peak. The 2nd century showed humanity both its heights and its reality, plague and chaos. Now the world was about to enter an era of darkness and swords.